anger, covetousness, lust, envy, pride, laziness and gluttony exist in us. Why anger? Because many impressions reached us, our interior, and we never transformed them. The mechanical result of such impressions of anger form these which exist and vibrate in our psyche and which constantly make us feel anger. Why covetousness? Indubitably, many things awaken covetousness in us: money, jewels, material things of all types, etc. Those things, those objects, reached us in the form of impressions. We committed the error of not having transformed these impressions into different things, into an attraction for beauty, into happiness, etc. Such non-transformed impressions naturally became of covetousness, which we now carry in our interior. Why lust? I already said that different forms of lust reached us in the form of impressions. In other words, there surged in the interior of our mind images of an erotic type whose reaction was lust. Since we did not transform those lustful waves, that unhealthy eroticism, naturally the result did not make itself wait. New morbidities were born in our psyche. Therefore, today we have to work on the impressions which we may have in our interior and on its mechanical results. Within we have impressions of anger, covetousness, gluttony, pride, laziness and lust. We also have within the mechanical results of such impressions, a bunch of quarrelsome and vociferous which we now need to comprehend and eliminate. Such work of our life consists in knowing how to transform impressions, and also in knowing how to eliminate the mechanical results of impressions which were not transformed in the past. The exterior world as such does not exist. What exists are impressions, and impressions are interior, and the reactions of such impressions are completely interior. No one could say that he is seeing a tree in itself. He may be seeing the image of a tree but not the tree. The thing in it, as Immanuel Kant said, is not seen by anyone. One sees the image of things. In other words, the impression of a tree, of a thing, surge in us, and these impressions are internal. They are of the mind. If one does not carry out one's own internal modifications, the result will not make itself wait. The birth of new is produced which come to enslave our essence, our consciousness, even more, which come to greater intensify the sleep in which we live. When one really comprehends all that exists within oneself with relation to the physical world, that they are nothing but impressions, one also comprehends the necessity of transforming those impressions, and upon doing it, the transformation of oneself is produced. There is nothing that hurts more than calumny or the words of an offender. If one is capable of transforming the impressions which such words produce in us, well, they then remain without any value. In other words, they remain like a check drawn against insufficient funds. Certainly, the words of an insulter do not have any more value than that which the insulted person gives them. Therefore, if the insulted person does not give them any importance, I repeat, they remain like a check drawn against insufficient funds. When one comprehends this, one then transforms the impressions of such words, for example, into something different, into love, into compassion for the insulter, and this, naturally, means transformation. Therefore, we need to be incessantly transforming impressions, not only the present ones but also the past and the future ones. Within us exist many impressions with which we committed the error of not having transformed them in the past, and many mechanical results of the same impressions which are the so-called which we now have to disintegrate, annihilate, in order for the consciousness to remain free and awake. It is indispensable to reflect on what I am saying. Things, persons, are nothing but impressions within us, within our minds. If we transform those impressions, we transform our life radically. For example, when there is pride in one, the latter has ignorance as its basis. For a person, for example, to feel proud of his social position, of his money. But if this person, for example, thinks that his social position is a mere mental matter, that it is a series of impressions which have reached his mind, impressions about his social status, when he thinks that such status is nothing but a mental matter, or when he analyzes the question of his worth, he comes to realize that his position exists in his mind in the form of impressions. Those impressions which money and social position produce are nothing but the external impressions of the mind. With the simple fact of comprehending that they are only impressions of the mind, there is transformation of the same. Then, pride, by itself, declines, collapses, and humility is born in us in a natural manner. Continuing the study of the processes of the transformation of impressions, I will proceed with something else. For example, the image of a lustful woman reaches the mind or surges in the mind. Such an image is an impression, that is obvious. We could transform that lustful impression through comprehension. It would be enough, in that instant, for us to think that that woman will one day die and that her body will become dust in the cemetery, and if with the imagination we saw her body in the process of disintegration in the grave, this would be more than sufficient to transform that lustful impression into chastity. If it is not transformed, it will be added to the other eye of lust. By means of comprehension, it is convenient that we transform the impressions which emerge in the mind. It is highly logical that the exterior world is not so exterior as is normally believed. Everything that reaches us from the world is interior because they are nothing but internal impressions. No one could put a tree, a chair, a palace, or a rock into his mind. Everything reaches our mind in the form of impressions, that is all. The impressions from a world which we call exterior and which is really not exterior as it is believed. It is undeniable that we transform impressions through comprehension. If someone greets us, praises us, how could we transform the vanity which this or that flatterer could provoke in us? Obviously, the praises, the flattery are nothing but impressions which reach our mind, and the latter reacts in the form of vanity. But if those impressions are transformed, vanity becomes impossible. How could the words of a flatterer be transformed by means of comprehension? When one really comprehends that one is nothing but an infinitesimal creature in a corner of the universe, one immediately transforms by oneself those impressions of praise, flattery, into something different. One converts such impressions into what they are, dust, cosmic dust, because one comprehends one's own position. We know that the galaxy in which we live is made up of millions of worlds. What is the Earth? It is a particle of dust in the infinite. And if we were to say that we are some organic microorganisms of that particle, then what? If we were to comprehend this when we're flattered, we would carry out a transformation of the impressions related to the praise and flattery or adulation, and as a result we would not react in the form of pride. The more we reflect on this, more and more we will see the necessity of a complete transformation of impressions. All that we see as external is interior. If we do not work with the interior, we are treading the path of error because we will not modify our habits. If we want to be different, we need to transform ourselves integrally, and we should begin by transforming impressions. By transforming the animal and bestial impressions into elements of devotion, sexual transformation, transmutation then surges forth in us. Unquestionably, this aspect of impressions deserves to be analyzed in a clear and precise manner. The personality that we have received or acquired receives the impressions of life but does not transform them because it is practically something dead. If the impressions fell directly upon the essence, it is obvious that they would be transformed because the essence would immediately deposit them exactly in the corresponding centers of the human machine. Personality is the term that is applied to everything that we acquire. It is clear that it translates impressions from all sides of life in a limited and practically stereotyped manner in accordance with its quality and association. In this respect, in the Gnostic esoteric work, the personality is sometimes compared to a terrible secretary who is in the front office, who is occupied with all the ideas, concepts, preconceptions, opinions, and prejudices. It has many dictionaries, encyclopedias of all types, reference books, etc., and is not in communication with the centers, in other words, with the mental, emotional and the physical centers, intellectual, motor, emotional, instinctive and sexual, in accordance with its unusual ideas. Consequently, or as a corollary, it so happens that it almost always puts itself in communication with wrong centers. This means that the impressions that arrive are sent to wrong centers, in other words, to places which do not correspond to them, producing, naturally, erroneous results. I will mention an example so that I will be better understood. Let us suppose that a woman attends to a gentleman with much consideration and respect. It is clear that the impressions which the gentleman is receiving in his mind are received by the personality, and the latter sends them to wrong centers. Normally, It sends them to the sexual center, and this gentleman gets to firmly believe that the lady is in love with him, and as is logical, it does not take long before he rushes to make insinuations of an amorous type to her. Indubitably, if that lady has never had that type of caring for the gentleman, with much reason, she cannot but feel surprised. That is the result of a terrible transformation of impressions. Here we see how bad a secretary the personality is. Unquestionably, the life of a man depends on this secretary who seeks transformation in its reference books without comprehending in the least what the event means, and consequently transmits, without preoccupations for what could happen, but feeling only that it is fulfilling its duty. This is our interior situation. What is important to comprehend in this allegory is that the human personality that we acquire and which we should acquire begins to take charge of our lives. Unquestionably, it is useless to imagine that this happens only to certain and specific persons. It happens to everyone no matter who it is. One finds out in observation that numerous characteristic reactions exist which are produced by the impressions which reach us. These mechanical reactions, unfortunately, govern us. It is clear that each person in life is governed by life itself. It does not matter if he calls himself liberal or conservative, revolutionary or Bolshevik, good or bad in the sense of the word. It is obvious that these reactions before the impacts of the exterior world constitute our own life. In this sense, we can say in an emphatic manner that humanity is completely mechanical. Any man, in life, has formed for himself an enormous quantity of reactions, which come to be the practical experiences of his existence. It is clear that every action produces its reaction, actions of a certain type, and such reactions are called experiences. The important thing would be, for example, in order to get to know better our actions and reactions, to be able to relax the mind. This mental relaxation is magnificent. To lie down on one's bed or on a comfortable armchair, to relax all the muscles patiently and then empty the mind of all types of thoughts, desires, emotions, memories. When the mind is still, when the mind is in silence, we can know ourselves better. In such moments of stillness and mental silence is when we really come to experience in a direct manner the crude realism of all the actions of practical life. When the mind is in absolute repose, we see the multitude of elements and sub-elements, actions and reactions, desires, passions, etc. is something foreign to us but which awaits the precise instant to be able to exercise its control over ourselves, over our personality. That is the reason why the silence and stillness of the mind is worthwhile. Obviously, the relaxation of the mind is beneficial in the most complete sense of the word, for it leads us to individual self-knowledge. So it is that all of life, in other words, exterior life, what we see and live, is for each person his reaction to the impressions which arrive from the physical world. It is a great error to think that what is called life is a fixed, solid thing, and the same for each person. Certainly, there is not a single person who has the same impressions which, with respect to life, exist in the human species, because they are infinite. Life, certainly, are our impressions of it, and it is clear that we can, if we so resolved it, transform such impressions. But as it was said, this is an idea which is very difficult to understand or comprehend because the hypnotism of the senses is very powerful. Although it may seem incredible, all human beings are in a state of collective hypnosis. Such hypnosis is produced by the residual state of the abominable condarto-guidor organ. When the latter was eliminated, the different psychic aggregates or inhuman elements which in their mass constitute the myself, the one-self, remained. These elements and subelements, in turn, condition the consciousness and keep it in a state of hypnosis. In this manner, therefore, hypnosis of a collective type exists. The entire world is hypnotized. The mind is engrossed in the world of the five senses and does not manage to comprehend how it could become independent of them. It firmly believes that it is a god. Our interior life, the true life of thoughts and feelings, continues being confused for our mere reasoning and intellective conceptions. Nonetheless, at the same time we know very well that the place where we really live is our world of thoughts and feelings. This is something that no one can deny. Life is our impressions, and the latter can be transformed. We need to learn to transform our impressions. However, it is not possible to transform anything in us if we continue attached to the world of the five senses. As I have said in my treatise of revolutionary psychology, experience teaches one that if the Gnostic esoteric work is negative, it is due to one's own fault. It is from the sensorial point of view that this or that person of the exterior world whom one sees and hears through the eyes and the ears has the blame. This person in turn will say that we are the ones to blame, but really, the fault is in the impressions that we may have about people. Many times we think that a person is perverse when in reality the person is a humble lamb. It is very convenient to learn to transform all the impressions which we may have of life. We have to learn to receive with gladness the unpleasant manifestations of our fellowman, the mental stomach. As we studied in the previous chapter, we know that there are three types of foods. Those related with breathing, with food properly said, and with impressions. The digestion of food brings about as a result the assimilation of vital principles for the blood. The result of respiration is the assimilation of oxygen, which is so valuable for human life. The assimilation or digestion of impressions brings about as a result the absorption of energy finer than the other two. The five senses correspond to impressions. There are two types of impressions, pleasant and unpleasant. The human being needs to know how to live, but for that, he has to learn to digest and transform impressions, and this is vital for comprehension. We have to transform impressions if we truly want to know how to live. All impressions which reach the mind have hydrogen-48. Unfortunately, the human being lives mechanically. Man can transform hydrogen-48 into 24 to fortify the chakras, hydrogen-24 into 12 to fortify the mind, and hydrogen-12 into 6 to fortify the will. In actuality, one needs to transform the mind to move on to a new mental level, or otherwise, impressions will continue arriving at the same wrong places of always. People believe that they are able to see things from different angles and that they are sovereign, but they do not realize that the human mind is limited by preconceptions and prejudices. In these modern times, we need to transform the mental apparatus. We need to be different. The fabrication of a superior intellectual apparatus, which is adequate to transform and digest impressions, becomes urgent and necessary. In the same manner that the digestive apparatus has a stomach in order for food to be assimilated, and in the same manner that the respiratory system has lungs to assimilate oxygen, the mechanical man should create a mental stomach. Do not confuse it or interpret it as a physical one. Before digesting impressions, we have to transform them. The Gnostic teaching permits and facilitates the creation of said stomach, in order to make of the intellectual animal something different. The necessity of transformation cannot be borne without having comprehended such a necessity. This comprehension surges upon having the Gnostic teaching. When one thinks differently and positively about people, it is a sign that one is changing. We need to cease being what we are in order to become what we are not. One has to become lost to oneself. The result of all of this is the appearance of someone who is not oneself. In the path of the transformation of impressions, we have to be sincere with ourselves, and we are not to persuade ourselves. In the beginning, there appears justification in us, but we need to study that such justification can be the fruit of self-esteem. We need to discover the causes and motives of our behavior before impressions. When impressions are transformed, everything becomes new. Only the masters of the occult fraternity can immediately transform impressions, whereas human machines do not transform them. The conscious man can modify situations brought about by past, present, and future impressions. If people are not capable of transforming circumstances, they will continue being toys of circumstances and of others. Life has an objective, and that is of a superior world. The Gnostic teachings teach how to live a superior world, how to live in a solar and immortal humanity. If one did not accept the superior world, transformation would not have a purpose. That is obvious. The mind, as it is now, is not good for anything. One needs to organize it, remodel it, furnish it, etc. In other words, place it on a superior intellectual level. In order to be able to transform impressions, we need to reconstruct the scene just as it happened and find out what it was that hurt us the most. If there is no digestion of impressions, there will not be any nourishment. If there is no nourishment, the existential bodies of the being will languish. The I is governed and nourished with hydrogen 48. Each day, each hour, new I are continuously being born. For example, mosquitoes bother us, the rain also, etc. There is always an addition and subtraction of I. Good impressions should also be transformed. If during the day one has had 3 impressions which have affected one's mood, they should be studied and transformed at night, utilizing an orderly procedure. Each I is linked with others and they are associated. The I join together to form the same scene. We have to be analytical and judicious in order to transform impressions, so that as a result, new faculties will appear. When persons do not transform themselves, they continue having a shameful and ridiculous state. Where there is no digestion, one is involuting. We have to digest the impressions of the same day. Do not permit the sun to set on your anger. We have to see things as they are. We have to create the mental apparatus, mental stomach which is convenient in order to not be victims of anything. The system to transform the impressions of the day. 1. Absolute relaxation. 2. Reach the state of meditation. 3. Relive the scene just as it occurred. 4. Seek within oneself the I which caused the problem. 5. Observing serenely, one places the ego in the defendant's bench and one then proceeds with the judgment. 6. Ask the Divine Mother Kundalini for the disintegration of the I problem.